Hello and welcome to another episode of the Vialle MX post-race show. The 12th round of 2025 Monster Energy AMA Supercross has been and gone, and we had our first true mudder of the 2025 season as Foxborough's Gillette Stadium was battered by rain all Saturday afternoon and into the evening, and even the magnificent work from the Dirtworks team and all at Feld Entertainment could do little to save the racetrack, and as a result we had mixed up results, some surprises, some landmarks, some disappointments, and we'll get into all of that on this episode of the Vialle MX post-race show. This is of course presented by Decal Works, Yamaha Motor USA, Yoshimura, Motorex and Fox Racing. And what do all of our sponsors have in common, I hear you ask? It's a fair question. All of our sponsors are winners as we record this today on Sunday from this weekend. An absolutely phenomenal achievement, and one that speaks to the fact that we only align with the best if they're on this podcast, our coverage. It means that we believe in what they can supply and provide you. Otherwise, we would not be sharing their message to the world. So congrats to all of the sponsors I just listed. We'll get into some of those successes in the next hour. I'm your host, Lewis Phillips, as per usual, joined by Michael Lindsay. Hello, how are you?
Probably about as lively as you are.
It's a long day, but
I did another all-nighter, so we're trucking along.
Despite the fact that the racing was not exciting and it was a bit of a mess, a quagmire, I'm quite excited to do this podcast because I do believe there are some poignant points to note, and we'll start with 450s as we always do. But rather than go straight to AP, I want to go straight to the title fight because realistically that trumps all at this point in the season. It is what we are all keyed in on. And I felt anxious throughout the day because I just did not want to leave Foxborough going, well, it was fun while it lasted. Let's hope 2026 goes down to the wire. Naturally, with Chase being 11 down, there was a chance for the potential of that. Webb was safe. Like, say Chase had won and Webb had DNF'd, it just would have flipped and Webb would have been, say, 11 points down. So that wouldn't have changed the dynamic much from our neutral perspective. But obviously the potential was there for Chase to lose significant points. He did lose some points, which leaves me with a conundrum. Because if you tell me the championship is on, I believe it. If you tell me the championship is now over, I can also believe that. I don't quite know where I lie on this spectrum. So where do you sit?
A lot of it depends on next weekend. So, forecast for next weekend is already worse. We're talking, I think the quoted amount of rain is already, it's a week out. Things will change. Quoted amount of rain is triple what we even saw this past weekend. So that throws everything up. Because if you were talking about a remaining 5 rounds that was dry, yeah, it's not over, but it's tough. It's just it back chase into a position where it's pretty much just he would have to click them off at this point. So is it on? Yes, I lean a little more towards off, but again, the pendulum can swing so heavily this next weekend, and a huge key point to that is the way that race ended. I'll just jump right to the cut of things. Like, we cut the races down. You have comments from Chase and Barsha and Kenny that basically all said right there when they got off the track, they're like, dude, my bike's about to blow up. Like, it's running so bad. Webb's blew up after the finish line. He sent it the last lap, and either the clutch completely failed or the bike completely failed. He didn't make it back past across the mechanics area. He was just kind of standing out there. I was taking photos of him, and when Peanut came up, he was like, that was within 10 seconds of being completely flip-flop the other direction. And again, with a mutter this next weekend, no, I guess it's not off. It isn't, just because of the conditions we're about to face, and just knowing those little facts right there, like, we could be talking about a completely different storyline right now if things would have just been 10 seconds difference.
Yeah, my stance is similar. I certainly feel as though we're on the limit of it being off. Maybe we're not quite there, but we're on the cliff edge. And this weekend in Philadelphia, which will, by all accounts, be a mudder, that can inspire confidence. Or, next question, prior to Foxborough, I feel like we were all as an industry on a similar page that Chase thrives in the mud, and should there be a mudder, Chase would likely have the upper hand. So now, with Foxborough in the pocket, do you look at Philadelphia's potential likely mudder as something that actually hurts Chase now rather than works to his benefit, or could potentially work to his benefit?
I mean, he still rode fantastic. You look at qualifying performance, he was first right down to the last second Barsha got him, which isn't the world's biggest shock because, I mean, when we name off, I know a lot of people defaulted to Aaron, but even more than that, Barsha is still one of my absolute favorites for a mud rider. He's just insane in those conditions. But, I mean, almost was number one qualifier, great heat race. Maine was going fairly well. I'm really impressed that this just goes back to that continuous conversation about Webb steps up when it's time. So, in one hand, no. I actually lean almost the opposite way of like, I'm not saying Webb put something together I didn't quite think he was going to do based on qualifying heats, everything. So hats off to him, of course, for his performance, but I could see it swinging again the other way next weekend. I am extremely curious, again, talking to so many of the guys about the bike issues towards the end, and if potentially this is going to be a worse mutter, which is hard to imagine. That was pretty bad. If it is crazy, it sounds like how much effort some of the teams put in for next weekend. Like we're having that much issues mapping lower compression and something. Do teams default to try to get the bikes to live longer? Because I think that was, again, Webb kind of risked it at the end of the race where a lot of the other guys were just trying to salvage the machines.
Yeah, it's certainly food for thought. And as I sit here and try to recollect, I don't recall a time when we had two horrific mudders back to back. I'm sure it's happened at some point. It has to have had, but I certainly can't think of that off the top of my head. So it's an interesting playbook for the teams and riders, because riders have their quirks, their processes, their little nuances in the mud. Whole shot device, wiping down the plastic, scoop tire, no scoop tire. There's a lot of strategy involved, which is quite fascinating. I'd imagine there was a lot of thinking going on in different corners of the country this week.
Yeah, again, I could see teams really, because, again, we're talking about championships here. Like, I think any team would be a fool if they don't at least sit down and have a conversation about what can they do to have a better mud machine next weekend. Now, what's curious, what we ran into, like, I heard a couple mechanics earlier in the day and a few staff go, oh, well, it's still not as bad as San Francisco. I kind of disagree in the sense that, like, when I think of San Fran, or even, like, Take me all the way back to, what was it? Was it 08 Daytona where Reed led the last time? That was 08. A lot of standing water and a lot of continuous rain is also good because it keeps mud moving off the bikes. We got to that point where it started to dry and get really clumpy, or like very sticky towards the main. And that's when you fill radiators, you pack a lot of weight on the bikes, you create a lot of heat, a lot of issues, where I would argue, like, okay, example, almost me and every photographer down there, heat races, none of us got screwed, like with mud, because it was wet enough, everything kind of kept moving. All of us got blasted in the main because the stuff was just clumpier and picked up and stuck to everything. That's kind of and like guys were getting stuck. That's kind of my example of, like, I know how much worse it must have been on the bikes just from walking around. When you have continuous rain, it can almost be better as long as, water doesn't get into air boxes and electrical. So if they're calling for more rain next weekend, that's also something to weigh as what that prep looks like again.
I played this game with a lot of riders. What's worse, San Fran or Foxborough? Everyone said Foxborough, and I think the reason that some struggle with it, and I struggled with it as well, is that San Fran looked like an epic mudder. The rain lashing down was prevalent in every TV shot, photograph. So visually, there was little need to interpret what was going on. It just screamed chaos. Whereas the rain was on and off at points, slower, as you say, for all the reasons you mentioned, of course. But I think the reasons that people maybe lean on San Fran is just the optics of the situation.
Visual. And that's what I'm saying. You think of the Daytona 09, a lot of standing water and constant downpour makes it look worse, where, like I said, my counter argument is it's actually better on the equipment. You wash out the mud, not as much weight's on it, the stuff moves around different, where you just saw guys randomly would pick the wrong line and be stuck. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to think. Like San Fran was terrible. We didn't have as many people randomly stuck as I feel like as often, because, again, the material was more like pushed out more because it had so much moisture being put in it all the time.
Yeah, we're not breaking news here. It's well known. When it's a mudder, the best case scenario is that it continues to rain. And Foxborough stopped raining at perhaps the worst possible time.
Literally.
What stood out to me from Foxborough 450-wise is ironically the very first lap and the very last lap. The first lap of 450 Heat 1, Chase and Cooper came out of turn 1 side by side. I think Chase was ahead. Not that it matters, but they doubled their way through the first section in sync, and it was so mind-blowing that one of them was that committed, but then the other was matching, and it was like it really...
toe-to-toe gladiators.
It was really championship time at that point in my mind. Like, neither of them wanted to give an inch. They were both willing to send it, for lack of
Even though it's just it's a mental thing. Like, I'm willing to do this. Are you willing to do this? Because I'm gonna give it like this all night if I can.
Yeah, it was really, honestly, the optics of those two racing side by side, and then in the back, like, they dropped the rest of the field in the first section. That will stick with me forever. And then, as you raised, Webb's last lap, I have no idea how that's... I have no idea. I have no words to describe this, but I can give you some numbers that will help.
Oh, he was like, what, almost a minute faster than... Was he a minute faster than, like, Chase and Barcia, most of those guys on the last lap, or something ridiculous?
So Webb started the last lap in 6th behind Roxon, Barcia, Sexton. Here were the last lap times. Webb, 147.567. Roxon, 239.581, so some 52 seconds a lap slower. Barcia, 207.823, which, despite being 20 seconds slower, I'm surprised it's that close. And then Chase, 248.656, so a minute and 1 second slower on the last lap. What more do you want from me? I have no idea how to explain that. He was doing the finish and the doubles, but he was doing that every lap. Obviously, there must have been a lap or two where he missed it due to circumstance, but he was nailing the finish and the following double more consistently than anyone else. And again, the optics of the situation were hilarious because the rhythm section prior to the finish, he was crawling through there slower than anyone. Really... If you focused on that section, it looked like Webb was in full struggle, full panic mode. Turn that 180, and we're into Webb is the best rider on track. Webb is phenomenal. It just the tale of two sections. It was from trail rider to Nitro Circus.
And then after the start line, that double, a lot of guys gave up on that one, and Coop was still doing it up to the end. Even I have a photo of him casing it, bike fully collapsed, elbows head into the bar pad. He's still doing it every lap. I thought it was interesting to watch him build up to it the next to last lap after what used to be the whoop section, that tight hairpin 90 onto the start straight. He gets to that corner and Chase got a little bit hung up getting out of that corner. So, I mean, Coop was within a couple bike lengths of him, and you could tell Coop was like, F it, I'm going for it. Floors it coming out of the corner, and the bike just spins in place to the point that Chase actually gets down that whole next straightaway before Coop's bike gets going, and then the fire was just on from there. Like, he visually had him in sights and then just sent that last lap to make it all happen. Again, Barcia, Sexton, I think Kenny also, right after the whoops, the last lap, he got a little bit hung up. He either stalled or got stuck or whatever. But, like, those guys were crawling, just trying to keep the bikes running, and Webb was just bouncing off the rev limiter. Like, again, he threw full risk out there. It really could have backfired when you consider he basically goes over the finish line and goes 100 feet and the bike dies and it's done for the night.
Now, I don't feel as though Webb will fall victim to this. We know he's way too smart for that. But it's interesting. He took a gamble. It paid off.
Yeah.
You could argue that this will almost give him a false sense of confidence in the next mudder in Philadelphia, because very easily that could go the other way, and maybe the spring in his step from that last lap carries over to the first lap, and he misjudges, pushes the limit too much, and it finally gives again. By no means do I think the Webb would fall victim to that trap, but with a lesser rider, I could certainly see that being the case. I think that Webb doing those jumps consistently was what helped him versus Chase. Chase, from memory, now obviously he jumped occasionally, but I don't really recall him jumping at all. Towards the end, I really felt like he needed to jump something have a hard landing to just release some of the mud that was stuck to his wheels, fenders, body, the lot. Because I'm still not quite sure why his last lap was so bad, other than the fact that, and I feel fairly confident that it was because the wheels of the bike were just so heavy and clogged up that he essentially was screwed. And a hard landing would have helped with that quite a lot. But I actually spoke to him in the airport this morning, and he confirmed that theory. But again, if you want an example of how differently a mud race can go, look at Chase in a heat race, as I said, jumping on the first lap, had momentum, got away, had a clear track, had the confidence that comes from that, and then compare that to the main event, mid-pack start, and it never got going. That's, again, we're not breaking news here, but a start is really crucial in a mud race, and we've got a perfect example of that in Foxborough. But speaking of the heat, another hilarious little note, and obviously this is just an admin error, but it's funny to me. Chase was docked 2 positions in the heat race for jumping on a red cross flag, and the official statement says that he jumped on a red cross flag in section 9. The track only had 8 sections. Which, again, obviously it's just an error, like a mistype, but it's just funny. Like, it's just funny to me. Like, it's just a funny thing to say.
Yeah. I know that was, speaking of that red cross flag situation, that was a conversation with Weber after race. I watched the HEP guys immediately grabbed AMA officials, and I know they protested Webb for a red cross flag jump. I personally don't know which one exactly they were talking about, but I did ask one of the AMA guys in passing, what are they speaking of? And they're like, yeah, we got to review it more, but from what we saw, he was like right at the down ramp when we saw it come out or when it became available to see. But then I've heard counter. Either way, basically HEP did try to protest Webb, which was, like I said, it's usually a 2-position dock, which if so, it would have bumped him to 5th if it would have gone through. And as of time of recording this on Sunday afternoon, they haven't docked him, so I would say at this point they've cleared him.
Oh, no, yeah. Everyone has been cleared except for Justin Cooper, who was docked 2 positions for cutting the track in section 8. I don't think I saw that, but it must have been quite egregious for everyone else to be spared. But
because I saw some big cuts, like Chase even had a decent one, which he took it really mellow. But was his the one where he went left after the finish line and basically had to cruise along the side and get back on?
Yeah, I was I didn't know where to land on that personally, but I felt like he was going to get away with it because if he had rejoined between the finish jump and the double,
he was probably going to get stuck in between them.
Yeah, and he would have got stuck facing like sideways, covering half a track. So it obviously would have been dangerous.
Particularly in mud races where he was kind of jammed, because that was the one where he was like kind of stuck on the side for a little while. I feel like once you've already kind of paid the penalty, once you've been there for a little while and you get out, it's kind of hard to be like, oh, he gained an advantage. He's already been stuck for a while. Like, he already lost a chunk of time. You really, unless he full on just like V's and cuts across the start line and gets on way farther down, you're not really gaining anything. He's already paid a penalty.
I don't know what the Webb. I saw Webb jump on a red cross on the double after pit lane, and to me that was quite black and white because from memory I didn't see the red cross just come out, as was explained in his defense and as is the reason he didn't get a penalty. I guess it was on TV, so I don't know if that's the one that was being protested. But then Chase, I didn't see this either, but Chase, I guess, jumped on a red cross, and if he didn't, he would have hit someone or something like that, but I didn't see this either. Or unless maybe that was a heat one, I don't know. I almost feel like in the end, someone just went, you're all fine. Like, you know what? Really, if we looked at it, we could give you all penalties, so instead we're going to go the opposite way and just say it is what it is.
The best argument I heard from one rider up near the podium was, I can't tell what color the flags are anymore, which legitimately I was watching the red cross flag that was after the where they cut across the start straight. That guy's, he had dropped it a couple times, just dragging riders out. He was washing it in a mud puddle, and his flag, it was brown with a little bit of a red cross. Like, I couldn't tell it was, I think I have a photo. I was laughing because I was like, this is getting worse. I can't even tell what flag you're holding anymore, sir. Like, they were washing it in a mud puddle to try to get any of the mud off it, but it just kept getting worse.
It really looked as though we were going to leave Foxborough with a tighter title fight. So it is a little bit deflating, the fact that we've ended up with it going the opposite way. But as we said, nothing's over. 15 points. If it was 17 points, I think I'd be much more negative about the situation. But 15 is at least, there's a flicker of light here.
I don't know how to feel about it because we'll get into it with 250s. Of course, 250 we shrunk down to a 4-man title fight within an 8-point swing and a tie. And then 450s are titans of the sport. We've ended up with a bit more of a gap because of this race. And I have a hard time. I was thinking about which I would rather have. I mean, the 4-man 250 thing is pretty exciting, but the premier class is the premier class. If I could have had an option, I would have liked to come out of it with a tighter 450 race, and 250s could have been blown more wide open, and I wouldn't have cared that much, or been blown more towards maybe like Vialle's, and I wouldn't have cared as much.
Of course, but
Premier is premier.
We've spoken about Chase and Cooper a lot, so I'll end that portion with this. If or when Cooper wins this title, we will all have personal moments in the season that we fall back on as that was the moment. For me, it will be Foxborough. That last lap, I will never forget. So when or if or when Cooper wins this championship, I will be on this podcast going, Foxborough was a moment for me where I was like, well done.
Again, mostly, I mean, the ride itself, the performance on the final lap, and then, like I said, I repeat it again, the risk versus reward of the bike failure after the finish line, like, couldn't have cut any closer. So that will stand out to me as the make or break of this championship for him a little bit there.
And I've been thinking this for the last week as well. Don't really want to mention it, but it is the elephant in the room. As we go down to the wire, those Arlington points are becoming more and more necessary or useful. And at the time, we said, let's just hope that it doesn't come down to that. Mm-hmm. And the closer we get, the more I'm like, maybe we're coming down to that.
Well, especially if Chase does manage to pull in a run here at the end, and if this championship ends at a 3-point deficit for Chase, a 5-point deficit, and that feels like that's. Oh, you're saying Foxborough is the moment, but then if it ends in that, the counter is Arlington is the moment that Chase lost it.
Yeah, exactly. I will not recall Arlington as a moment that Coop won it. I will recall it as a moment Chase lost it. Foxborough was a moment that Coop won it.
Yes.
Like it was all Coop. Yeah. No one else intervened. There was no obviously lady luck with the weather, but it was all him. So yeah, Cooper was in fact my winner of the night. But the real winner, and it's taken us far too long to get to him, is Aaron Plessinger, who used Decal Works graphics en route to his win. Of course, this is Decal Works' third 450 Supercross win of the season, so congratulations to those guys. And you can use the same product that Chase Sexton and Aaron Plessinger and Tom Vialle have used in 2025 Monster Energy AMA Supercross by heading to decalmx.com, and there are a variety of options, seat covers, plastics, bike graphics. You can customize stuff on there. You can play around and really get a package that suits your needs and your desires, which is what Decal Works care about, giving you what you want and the quality that you demand. In fact, I think the graphics are so good quality that both AP and Chase will probably just use the same ones next week, because I'd imagine they've left Foxborough without a single scratch. But congrats to Decal Works for their win with AP. There's not really much to say. AP was the odds-on favourite, maybe in tandem with Justin Barsha. There was a lot of pressure on him throughout the day. He admitted to this. And naturally, the second it rains, everyone goes up to him and tells him what a great chance he has and how this is his night. But he truly delivered. From early on in the main event, he was unchallenged. He was riding a different track to everyone else. Much wider lines, flowing, much nicer. And equally, I think that's why he was... didn't fall victim to his bike getting clogged with mud. Maybe Chase could have benefited from some of the lines in turns for his teammate was using. But congrats to AP, and don't look now, but it's really quite something. When we left Arlington, which was the last race of AP's difficult period, let's say, he was 11th in points and... Okay, I'm going to have to get a calculator out now. Please hold. He was 59 points behind third in the championship. And Arlington was what, round 7? Yes, round 7. We're now leaving round 12, and AP is just a mere... I can't do that math. But he's much closer. And he's really closed in on Malcolm, Barsha, Jacob, and everyone else. And his charge towards the front of the championship standings is really something. So I wanted to give that some credit as well.
30s. I think he's 50 points behind Roxon. Unless I have the wrong results pulled up here.
Okay, maybe I'm talking more about
Roxon, we're like, you're Jacob, Malcolm, Justin. It's very close now.
Yeah, the 4th place then is where he's closed in on.
Yeah.
My bad.
That was still a huge turnaround. I will say two riders I will use as a counter, not to throw one under the bus. Plessinger versus the person we just mentioned, third Roxon. We'll get to Kenny and the poor knee thing. Watching Kenny dog paddle every section for a man that has such good technique is one of the absolute best to watch on a bike. Watching him just doing everything possible to stay on the motorcycle at times. And Aaron literally, I have so many photos of him, he doesn't even look like he's trying. He's just sitting, coming into corners, feet are both on the pegs. It looks he's reaching up for a tear off. He looks relaxed. Everybody else is feet off in every section. They are struggling. They look like they are hanging on for dear life. And Aaron, you wouldn't know it was a real mud race if you just looked at Aaron's form on the bike and eliminated everything around him.
Yeah, agreed. But that is why AP is so heralded in these conditions. Speaking of Roxon and dog paddling, I guess what has now transpired is, as well as the AC separation, there was actually a slight ankle injury in there, but the shoulder was such a focus that the ankle did not emerge until later on. I don't know to what extent. I don't know if it's something more serious or not, but I think it's now shoulder and ankle in the list of Ken Roxon's ailments. Of course, he tweaked one of those in practice, was questionable for the night show, skipped opening ceremonies, despite that being just a small walk onto the podium. But it paid off because he was rather solid in the main event, 4th place.
He had was it in the heat or it was in the heat when he had the helicopter moment coming over what was supposed to be an on-off at one point. The bike just spun around.
It was like his throttle stuck, or he got whiskey, or
just completely spin him off. And at that moment, knowing the ankle knee, I'm like, that's it. He's not getting up. And again, he had a very hard-fought night for his position, and knowing he's dealing with the shoulder and now the ankle, and just watching him fight around the track, that man has got to be sore. I was already talking to Brooks before the race. I know last week he did literally 5 or 6 starts. That's all he rode during the week. And then I don't believe he rode again this last week, just starts. And then even that main event, right before, like when they were calling everybody up to opening ceremonies, I stepped through their tent really quick and I said, "Are you guys going racing?" And they're like, "He hasn't said yet. Everything's ready, but he has not walked out of the truck and said if he's doing it yet." So, I mean, even according to them, like right around opening ceremonies time, they weren't sure if he was going down to the heat race yet.
I've got to think that the conditions that we've had the last 2 weeks are not helping his shoulder. A lot of upper body strength needed, a lot of strain on arms and shoulders and all limbs, really. I can't imagine this is ideal. And I would honestly be surprised if he gets back to midweek practice at all before Salt Lake City. But maybe he can squeak a day or two in here somewhere. Shane McElrath, again, a hugely surprising podium, but also not that surprising. 4th in San Francisco last year. I want to say 6th in East Rutherford in 2023. Shane McElrath is a great mud rider. So, although this is, yes, quite surprising, and if you'd said that Shane McElrath would get a podium in 2025, I don't think anyone would believe you. In reality, in hindsight, when you sit down, not that much of a shock. Not a knock me down with a feather sort of situation.
No, I agree. It's kind of fun. Like, again, I had to do that little bit of research afterwards because I remember at one point in the race thinking, Shane, good mud rider? Is he? Is he not? Had to take a quick peek even after his heat race. But in general, he falls into a category of a few guys in the 450 main. I mean, we won't probably go into it too much because it's very easy to look at guys like Nichols, especially Logan Leitzel, Lane gets that, best race of the year. It's just such an odd event. Like, great for them. I know any of those guys are stoked with the performance, the purse, the points. But in the same breath, it doesn't. Well, next weekend with the mutter it can happen again, but it doesn't lead to anything in the dry. It doesn't. That's not an automatic like, oh, this guy's improved. So it's always a weird one to talk about with these mud races because it's hard. You can't really read into these individual performances.
No, but let's not overlook the fact that Shane has been slowly chipping away and slowly getting better. The improvements have been so minor that maybe they don't leap off the page, but they have certainly been there. And for a rider that's been floating in obscurity since he moved to the 450 class, I think this year has been a turning point of sorts. And of course, great news for Yariv, Martin Davalos, and the Quadlock Honda team to get a podium, losing Max Anstey. Left that team in a little bit of a, again, obscure position. Didn't really know where they were going. They'd tasted such success. Would they accept a step back? Was that worthwhile? But having Shane, Joey, and Carson Mumford has seemed to pay dividends. They've had a very nice 2025. And pop quiz question or answer. This was not Yariv and Martin Davalos' first 450 podium. Justin Brayton at Houston 2 in 2021.
Was Marty a part of the team yet, though?
I don't know. Maybe not.
That was pre Marty, but that was Yariv's team, yeah. Because I was going to say that it's kind of funny where this team has gone, in the sense of Yariv's first year here was very 250 focused. I think that was Oldenburg and was it Clout? Correct me if I'm wrong. Was it Oldenburg and Clout in like 2020? I have lost you. I have no audio.
Hello. Sorry, I muted myself for a moment and forgot to hit unmute. Clout rings a bell, but it could have been another Australian.
Clout and Oldenburg in the U.S., and then the next year, of course, he brought in JB, and you have that performance. And in his case, like any team in the area, you kind of struggle maybe, hey, where is the focus worth putting, especially when you're a smaller budget, They've definitely tasted a lot of good success in the 250 class. I actually remember the Clout and Oldenburg year was really good. Of course, Max kind of put them on the map as being able to run up front. But he said also JB did very well in this program, and Shane now has put them on the podium again in the 450 class. Shane has had a great year. Joey's had some big flashes. It is interesting for a team like them is kind of going forward, where the focus lies, especially as a Honda team. Where with any OEM relationship, where do you want to be pegged as? Where do you want your support to lie? Where do you want to focus with a manufacturer? And it's funny because you think of the Jet and the Hunter situation, and if you're on a Honda team, it's like, what's really the point of being in the 450 class? They already have, some of the most marquee guys, the best, potentially the best in the sport at the moment. But again, where it's turning out so good from with Shane and Joey this year does make you kind of wonder where they'll put their focus going forward.
I don't want this to turn into a discussion, so I'll just leave this as a passing comment. Maybe we can get into it on another week. But I do want to give Honda some props because I feel like both here and in MXGP, maybe MXGP more so, but I do feel like this is a global thing. I feel like the Honda support teams below HRC in each series have somewhat struggled to find their place in the Honda hierarchy over the last decade. You could argue that they've almost... What's the reason for their existence? What's Honda trying to achieve with these B, C, D teams? But now with Quadlock and Phoenix, and then in MXGP with Honda SR Moto Blues Motul with Kevin Hawkmo, Honda's hierarchy is really starting to take shape. And I've been critical of Honda in the past because I haven't quite been able to determine. It's just felt like their structure beyond HRC has been a little bit misguided. But both sides of the Atlantic, there is some nice improvement there. So I think that's worth mentioning. Justin Barsha was disappointed not to podium or win in the mud, but this was still a step forward for him, given his up and down season. And actually, if you want some insight, some hilarious insight from Barsha, you should check out our press day interview, press day in quotation marks, because there's a lot there. And some interesting stuff about Baker's Factory and all of that. And Barsha is, of course, a great personality. And that is presented by Decal Works as well. Let's move on to 250s. But before we do, I mentioned all of our sponsors won over the weekend. Well, Fox Racing may not have got a win in Foxborough, but they did get a win at the MXGP of Sardinia as Kai de Wolf went 1-1 in the MX2 class and reclaimed the red plate. So congrats to Fox Racing as well. Bold, untamed, and pushing the boundaries of aesthetic, style, and design. Fox Racing's new spring MX graphics launching with Hello Future disrupt the status quo and make no apologies for the interruption. Compromised of head-to-toe kits plus a slew of head-turning men's and women's lifestyle pieces, its spirited graphic combined with dialed-in fit, comfort and construction sends a message loud, clear and confidently. The future belongs to those brave enough to answer the call. Thank you to Fox Racing.
Before we jump to 250s, I have one last 450 question for you since you're the stats expert. In the stadium with Aaron's win, they announced that we now had the most winners ever in a season. I thought with Aaron's win, we were tying the most wins ever produced in a Premier Class season.
I'm certain that's wrong because I'm pretty sure we had 7 in 1997 and I'm pretty sure we had 8 in 1985.
That's what I thought. I thought 8 was the number we needed to meet, but they said that in the stadium, and it caught me very off guard. And I was trying to do the math real quick, and I was like, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah, there was 7 winners in 1997. A bit of a chaotic night all round, including for those trying to do live timing results and stats, apparently. 250s was much wilder than 450s, though, and let me start with this. Was this the happiest podium that we've ever seen? And B, this had to have happened before because, if nothing else, it happened in 1974 at the first round of Supercross ever. But have we ever had a podium full of first-time podium finishers?
The only time I can think of, and I could still be wrong, this isn't accurate, is 250 East region when we used to go to Canada and it didn't count for points, and was it the Butler team the one year with 250 Hondas swept the podium, and I don't know if any of their guys had ever been on a podium.
With all due respect,
again, I'm reaching.
We're not counting.
I'm just saying that's the only other thing I can think of.
We're not counting that.
If
someone tries to put that in the record books, we're taking that out of the record books. But it did, yes, it would have happened, like I say, if nothing else, it happened at the first ever Supercross.
Yes.
So, but yeah, it's certainly been some time. I can't recall. I would look into it, but I feel like you'd have to, it could take a day. You'd have to go deep into the record books.
To your point, it's funny to see 3 people, other than first-time podiums, also have 3 people set their all-time, personal, best, like watching Chance celebrate winning. A lot of people think, hey, he's won outdoors. It was his first Supercross win. Colin's never top 5, right? Is his a 6th or 7th his personal best? I mean, to jump from that to second? Or
off the top of my head, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if he snuck a 5th in there.
I thought his 6th was best, but I got to double check. So I mean, for him to jump in that and then gauge his results. So to see. It's very interesting usually when you have one performance like that. You have a team and you have other riders that are stoked for this person, but to see 3 of those kind of celebrations going on at once was very uplifting. Yes, to your point, possibly the happiest podium I've seen in a long, long time.
And let's start with Hymas, of course, who used Yoshimura power to power through the slop and heavy dirt in Foxborough, of course, with Yoshimura attached to his Honda HRC Progressive Steed. It was almost never in doubt that he would end up in this position. And without doubt, that gave him immense confidence and belief as he tackled the elements. You can head to yoshimura-rd.com to get your own powerful package for your bike, no matter what it is. A couple of Hymas notes. One, he started the heat race, he had no whole shot device, which was a weird choice and a bold choice, and one that he didn't replicate in the main event. 2, in the main event, he went to the to the far outside gate, which the no whole shot device in the heat was a bad decision. This was a genius decision because they only used 20 gates for the heat races. So the far outside was barely used. Therefore, the ruts on the other side of the gate were effectively non-existent in comparison to the other gates. And yeah, real nice, genius little bit of move there. There's also the way they were scraping the mud off. Yes. They were pushing it away from that path. So yeah, because
he mentioned where the equipment was working on the whoops next to, because I didn't notice that. The gate thing made sense because I saw him on the line and he kind of pointed out how good his gate was, like no ruts or it hadn't really been used. But until I talked to him after the race, I didn't realize that. But he was right. The way they had been tracking the whoops and the tractors had been out there, while the middle was very sloppy and sunk down, the side of the track he was on had some of the hardest base, so there was actually something to accelerate off of.
And this was his first podium. Hilariously, on press day, again, quotation marks, I said to him that, in a weird way, maybe the Indianapolis crash and the subpar performance in Birmingham is a relief, because he kind of found himself in title contention unexpectedly and maybe wasn't ready for that position because he'd never had a podium, had barely started in Supercross, let alone coming off injury. And he agreed. Said, very much so, I wasn't ready and I shouldn't have been in that position and I have so much to learn and now I can just focus on learning for the rest of Supercross and focus on outdoors and come into Supercross in 2026 ready to contend. Well, fast forward 24 hours and Chance Hymas is back in title contention. All of that is out of the window. He's only 8 points down and maybe going to win this thing. But I'll ask you this. Do you consider Chance Hymas a legitimate contender in the same vein as Tom Vialle, Seth Hammaker, and RJ Hampshire? Of course, those other riders much more decorated in Supercross. So Hymas is maybe more of a punt. So is he
Definitely
equal to those?
Percentage-wise, lowest of the four, just naturally between his points being the farthest out, the result. But of course, like we talked about with the 450s, we have another torrential mutter this next weekend, and Chance, yeah, he's got a young career, but he grew up in Idaho. He's raced a lot of unfroze rounds where it's thawing, muddy. Raced a lot of off-road growing up as well. Like, he is a very good mud rider, and again, we have another one coming up. So percentage chance, don't have one kind of cooked up, but yes, lowest chance for Chance of the four. So it feels like, we're still talking about the other three. He is a bit more in it than him, but it could swing even farther his way this next weekend. And again, it's funny as a reset for him because he said to me after the race is, to your point, what he said about outdoors, like he basically said he had pretty much given up on Supercross for the season. Like he was full steam ahead on outdoor program, getting ready, testing during the week, and now kind of has to reset. But the one bright side for him is he's very much because he wasn't in this title fight early, he's in a very much, he can risk it. Kind of on the Coop thing, we get to a mutter next weekend. He could really be willing to hang it out and make it happen. Because if he blows it next week, it's like, I wasn't even in this till last week, so who cares? So he's in I feel like a unique position there where he doesn't have that stress on top of him. Where like you look at the result that RJ had in the mud, that's not good. You look at Tom's, absolutely terrible. There's a lot of pressure that weighs on those two, particularly, and like even Seth, like, okay, Seth's more in it now, but there's that fear for him, like, okay, I've got to maintain through the next round if it's bad, where Chance doesn't really care what happens at the next race.
I don't really know how to phrase this question, but of the four, who will be judged most harshly for not winning? Who needs to win it the most? Who almost doesn't need to care about this at all? It's a real interesting position.
The race or the champ? You're saying the championship?
Yeah, the championship, of course. Because
I mean, the easy one is Seth and Chance have more years in the tank in this class. So yeah, it doesn't. I don't feel like it weighs on them that much. Both of them were farther out of it at the beginning, so I think that conversation narrows to RJ and Tom, and I feel like it weighs on Tom the most as the defending hasn't gone to win so far. RJ came in, injured. So I would say of all of them, I feel like the potential loss of the championship from a outside perspective, it may not weigh on him as a rider since he's won before, but I would think it most harshly would be viewed upon Tom.
I disagree, except you could say that simply because he was the one with the red plate at the halfway point and the advantage. But if you discredit that and go back to round one, as we've covered, few people were talking about Tom as a legitimate title contender. So I feel like, and again, maybe the injury does skew this slightly, but I think that if you'd said RJ will get beaten by Seth Hammaker, Chance Hymas, or Tom Vialle, a lot of people would have scoffed and go, he's got those guys covered in Supercross. So, and again, maybe not before round one, because RJ was really quite adamant that his injury was holding him back. But now with the evidence, there is no reason for him to not win this championship. He's proven to be plenty good enough. So it's interesting, though. 4 riders who are in very different positions, and rare as well, because how often do we have a potential champion who was not even mentioned as a contender in a passing comment pre-season? I guess you'd go back to Cooper Webb in 2019 in the 450 class, but I'd have to fact check, but I don't think us, any other media outlet, any fan mentioned Hymas or Hammaker as championship contenders pre-Tampa. And here we are, one with a red plate and one with the momentum. That's a pleasure and a blessing in itself for this title fight and the intrigue that surrounds it. But
like I said, the circle back is I just love it because you have the 2 riders, the veterans exiting the class, and the 2 that, like I said, maybe it weighs a little more Seth, but the 2 that I feel like don't have a lot to lose at this point. And that makes it really exciting to the end. Okay, the other clincher is the 250 class has a completely different storyline next week, and even just the 450s. We have a mutter combined with an East-West shootout, correct?
Yes. Well, a showdown. Shootout is...
Showdown.
In the past. But, there's a potential that both title fights could be thrown upside down again. I don't really know how that looks, it being turned upside down again. Maybe we just revert back to pre-Foxborough and all of this was irrelevant. Yeah. But yeah, you mentioned Cullen Park with Phoenix Honda's second place. Yes, this is surprising, but I do kind of want to give Cullen some credit, similar to Shane, I guess, for what he's done up until this point, because he's been so consistent and in it that actually there's no better way to demonstrate that than the fact that he is just 15 points out of the red plate, which is phenomenal, and I'm sure he has to pinch himself a little bit to be in that position. But he has really been, A, brilliant, and B, the class of that Phoenix Honda team, whereas I do feel like his teammates maybe get more of the limelight, get talked about more, and I don't really know why.
Well, especially, I mean, I think Commissioner Cullen had been there a couple of years, a few injuries, has had a hard time since his rookie year putting together a full season. He's, I believe, been injured in the next 2 seasons. This is his 4th year. It felt like a little bit of a reset there with fresh blood with Towers and Ferry and Romano. I think a lot of, the attention was put on Romano. And yes, Cullen's deal was pretty last minute. His deal was signed the day I did the team photo shoot. We had the other guys there, and his deal was put together later. And yeah, now Cullen is the veteran on that program in terms of the 250s and is carrying it. Actually, I will go back to what I said earlier. I looked. 7th is his prior best. He has never had a top 5, and he went straight to 2nd. But that is still a shock to me because Cullen is extremely good indoors, and is a unique kid. Being people read his where he's from. It says Claremont, Florida, and they think, oh, you moved there for facilities. He was actually raised there. He's become good friends with, Chase and Dino and these guys over the years, and he's got great mentors around him. I think Cullen's ceiling is quite high. So, yes, the 2nd, I'm stoked for him, but I'm not going to say I'm terribly shocked.
Yeah, I really do rate Cullen. I've been on record as saying he's the most underrated rider in the sport worldwide, but I guess that is an old narrative because with a podium, can you really be underrated? Or maybe this makes him more underrated going forward. I guess we'll have to see how the respective narratives play out. And similarly, Gage Linville's podium, not as shocking as, say, Justin Rodbell getting on the podium or Trevor Collip, who was in there for a little while. Going back to Nashville Showdown last year, Gage has proven himself to be a legit top 10 speed guy. So yes, that is a surprise, but again, not to the level of Justin Rodbell, who was 4th. Yeah.
But another one, Gage has never had a top 10 even.
No, but
11th was prior best. But guys that, like you said, almost are like fulfilling what I think me and you perceive of him. Same thing. I think me and you've gone on record saying on this, and I've agreed with you, is I think Gage has been overlooked in his past 2 years as he's performed. And that's not a slight in any way against Dirt Bike Depot, but I am a bit surprised that somebody didn't take a chance on him after, his last year of performances, because I do think there is a high ceiling on Gage that, last time was better, but higher than what we've seen in his prior results.
Yeah, and even more impressive about his Foxborough ride was he was down in the first turn with RJ Hampshire, and if you watch the TV coverage, he got up didn't even look for his bike and was kind of stretching out his shoulder as if he was injured. And that's the last you see of him because they cut away. So for him to go from that, looking at maybe a potential injury, to the podium is mind-boggling. And naturally, he had no idea that he was in that position or close to that position. So he was quite shocked when he crossed the finish. He did say that in the first turn crash, a handlebar hit his Adam's apple. So he was struggling to speak and breathe and all of that stuff. So yeah, to go from that position to a podium in 8 minutes, work that one out. You can't, because watch the replay, you'll struggle to figure out which rider he actually was. So I guess we'll just have to imagine his path to that position. A lot of standouts in the East main event, a lot of riders with career best finishes. We're not going to stop and congratulate them all because we'll be here forever. But they all deserve their flowers. If we jump down to RJ Hampshire, or actually, I'll say this about RJ Hampshire and Seth Hammaker. Neither rider had the result that they were hoping for or would have liked, but the fact that both riders entered or exited Foxborough in a better position than they entered, championship-wise, kind of means like you just throw your hands up and go, well, we're better off, forget about that and move on.
Yeah, if you would have told both of them before they went out for that main event that, Seth, you're going to finish 9th, RJ, you're going to finish 15th, but you're going to be in a better position, the championship with they're under, they'd both be like, you're just kind of like, okay, I'll take it. Like, that doesn't sound right, but...
Yeah, I guess if you want to be on a negative side, maybe RJ specifically kicks himself because that could have been a huge point swing and he could be sat with an advantage now.
Yeah.
So
even without a huge performance, which he moved forward decent at one point. I think he may have tossed it again. He definitely went down a couple times. He was you could almost not find him on the track, but even if he could have came back to 7th or something like that. I mean, like I said, Linville proved it was definitely doable. He could have came out here, Villopoto hands.
Well, you just reminded me, actually. I'm fairly certain this was RJ, but again, impossible to tell who's who. 90% sure this was RJ, but I guess I'll say a rider. Came out of the second turn and got squirrely, went back into the first lane, and then
I saw that.
Rode through that entire section backwards with zero trepidation or I shouldn't be here, just claimed that dirt. This is my section now and I'm just gonna go all the way to the next turn. I don't know if that was on TV either, but if it was, that's highlight reel stuff. There was zero effort. I don't know if that counts as cutting the track, because technically you're on a track.
Somebody in 250s did something similar after the mechanics area that messed up on-off before the double they built out of it. Whoever it was got squirrely off the first part, landed in what used to be the whoop lane, and just went wide open down it, head on to people, as close to the blocks as possible, and then got back on the track after the double, one of the laps.
Messy, let's say. You can really debate whether this was a good look or how you can even police an event like this for top flight racing. But, of course, we need to talk about Tom Vialle, who, realistically, most would have pegged for the win or a great result in Foxborough just because he's European and dealt with the mud more than most. Truthfully, and I tried to rack my brain on this, there isn't a Tom Vialle mud ride that stands out from his MXGP days. But naturally, again, his experience in the conditions should have served him well. He was actually in a not bad position. I want to say top 5, but maybe not, when he went down in the second rhythm section. And then eerily similar to Carmichael at Anaheim 1 in 05, because he was on the third jump, spinning himself around, short guy as well, spinning himself around like it was a real deja vu moment. But then I blinked and he was out of the second section, across from the first section on the plywood. And I don't really know how we got there. Yeah. But then the front wheel was very clogged up. That wasn't going anywhere. Back wheel was spinning flat out and the bike wasn't moving.
His throttle was I think he had so much mud in the throttle. I heard somebody say he was trying to get his throttle to shut off. Maybe that's why I launched over. I heard his throttle was stuck wide open, somebody told me.
I felt like it looked like his throttle was stuck open, but then it also looked like the front wheel wasn't moving, so I don't know what the issue was. And then at the end of the race, you looked up and he popped up by the manager's tower. So I have no idea how he got there either. So again, similar to what I said about trying to piece this thing together, It's almost like playing a game of Where's Waldo with these riders. They just appear in different areas of the stadium. At one point, Vialle was next to me in the press box. It was amazing.
Here's the big one we've been doing every week. I mean, give it to me, title percentages.
No. I thought you were going to say, give it to me, the Tom Vialle Sympathy Corner, presented by Motorex. Motorex, known for high-quality engine oils, also has an entire line of clean care and lube products to keep your bike running strong and looking great. Maintenance made easy with race-proven Motorex clean care and lube products. Motorex present the Tom Vialle Sympathy Corner. It's Sympathy Corner this week, not Apology. We've bounced between those two lanes. But this week, all we can do is feel sorry for Tom, who had what was going to be a great night points-wise ripped from his grasp due to some mud-related issues. But Motorex, of course, don't have to wallow for long because they did win the 450 main event with Aaron Plessinger. So some success there for those guys. Title percentages, again, with the mud, let's say that we're going to have dry races for the rest of the year and try to percentage these riders based purely on their ability, which, to be honest, doesn't make it any easier. I still like Tom's consistency. But it's not that I like that a hell of a lot more than what Hammaker and RJ do. You can't really go far off of just 25 apiece, I don't think. I think you can throw a 30 in there, maybe a 33 at points, but...
Well, I was going to say maybe the one is you go 30-30, 30-10, with, again, Chance having kind of the lowest still.
But then I think that's quite low for Chance, considering where we're at. But I guess you need to see a dry win from him.
If you go back to next week and being a mudder, again, Tom has more experience because of MXGP. I even heard a couple people with KTM 10 say he was excited for the weather, but then I didn't think qualifying was that great. You know, the whole thing. So, like, are you concerned going, even though Tom, the consistency, the experience, but are you concerned with a mudder for him next weekend? Or do you just think, oh, it'll kind of revert to normal? Not saying he'll win next weekend, but saying, like, oh, he'll get an acceptable result, a top 5, a 7th, or are you concerned that next weekend could go have a repeat-ish?
No, not at all. Again, to clarify, no mud incredible ride sticks out in my mind from his MXGP days, so I don't believe he's just an incredible mud rider. But prior to that one mistake, he was the best placed out of the title contenders. So I don't judge him harshly for one mistake costing him dearly, because at the end of the day, that's pot luck in the mud. Any one of these riders could have tipped over once, which most of them did, and then had that destroy their race for one reason or another. So, yeah, I don't really feel that concerned for Tom. I just think we get back onto a consistent path again here, starting in Philadelphia. Again, don't overlook that prior to the crash, he was best placed out of all of the title contenders. Yeah. Anything else from 250s that stands out?
4 quick ones, even though...
4 quick ones?
Very quick.
17 quick points before we wrap up.
Rod Bell's 4th. That was him moving to the 250 class this year. He has not raced the 250 class all year. Mark Finnis switched teams this last weekend. Basically walked out of club, switched to Partzilla. Was number 1 time qualifier due to the CB practice thing. I mean, he definitely got track advantage. Believe 8th, of course, is his all-time career high. Definitely an odd week for him. Dane Briggs just got his pro license from doing futures. That was his first professional race. Second time qualifying, podiumed his heat race, and honestly led the first couple laps of the main solid. Like, again, yes, circumstance of start, not a bad performance till he went down twice in the same lap. So actually 3 things.
Yeah, I was going to say you've left. Well, I'll take your 4th then. I'll fill your roster. Maximus Voland, I think that handbrake is a massive advantage in the mud. You're free to just paddle around with your legs without concern. No risk of mud getting compacted around the rear brake. I can't think of a downside. I think the handbrake is, a massive advantage in the mud. And who knows, maybe this will be a development where whenever the rain comes, everyone just rolls out handbrakes now. Maybe that's
it didn't
the
work
next
from
wave.
the main, but he looked good in the heat race, and he looked good in practice. He's definitely loose in the mud. Definitely does not give a lot of shits in the mud.
And of course Maximus Voland, a Yamaha rider, Yamaha 1, the Futures main event. Again, continuing our string of winning podcast sponsors with Cade Johnson. He won the Futures main event on his YZ250F. So congrats to him and congrats to everyone at Yamaha.
It's my freedom. It's my fix. It's the endless pursuit of trying to find that flow.
Of course, Cooper Webb extended his points lead aboard his YZ450F, and Nate Thrasher kind of moved himself somewhat into title contention-ish, more so, a little bit. So that's positive. Actually, I wanted to ask you this about 250 East. If you had to bet on an energy drink winning this title, who would you bet on?
Oh, Jesus. Red Bull, because they got 2 out of 4.
Yeah, I figured that would be the
Tom and
answer.
Chance, that one's a little hard. If it was all 3 across the board, I still, like I said, I've kind of been so positive on since the opening round. Monster, if like Chance wasn't out, I'd go Monster because of Seth. I still have a very good feeling about Seth in this championship.
Naturally, this would have happened more recently, but it still feels odd. Like, there's a chance that Red Bull don't win either one of these titles. And I feel like it would have been some time since Red Bull went titleless in Monster Energy AMA Supercross. So it's certainly getting away from the Red Bull athletes very slightly, it feels. But still very much in it with 5 rounds to go. Before we wrap up, let's just talk about the landscape of having these mud races. It wasn't must-see television, slow speed, chaotic, so that's exciting. You know, you have a mud race, you have these wild results, that's exciting, a change from the norm, but it doesn't visually look great or the most professional. As we alluded to, hard to police because everyone's breaking rules in one way or another through jumping on flags or cutting the track or even stuff that you probably wouldn't even imagine to list. So, A, what do you think about the way it looks? And B, what do you think about the way you can police this as a professional sport that's trying to be looked at in the same vein as F1?
So before we jumped on this pod, I kind of mentioned I have a fairly harsher opinion of this. Something I appreciate about our sport is mud, rain, snow, sleet, shine. I think that, of course, is a huge part of motocross. I say that. I think it's a huge part of motocross. I do not personally believe it's a huge part of Supercross. Look, with us being on mostly a streaming package now, and I believe having some more flexibility, I could be wrong. I don't know how that all works. I wish maybe there was, it would have been a little difficult, but it could have worked within a time window. I'm not being that I have the fix-it-all answer, but in a situation like what we ran into where we had very good weather earlier in the day, a lot of teams comment on we canceled all the practices when we knew the weather was going to be good. The radar said we weren't going to really have rain in the morning. We waited to run a practice right before it dumped and just kind of set us up on a terrible night. Look, NASCAR and F1 move their races all the time, time-wise, within a day. MotoGP does it. I think we put on the best performance. I don't think we go for chaos in this situation. I think, as a sport, we have to figure out how to do that. Particularly with Supercross, it's just, like I said, it's not, other than the chaos factor, it's not great racing. I feel really bad for the teams and the mechanics. It is bad budget-wise. Everything in there is just destroyed. Every bike there is just junk at this point. That is a very expensive evening for everyone involved. It's not great for fans. I give hats off to the people from the Foxborough, Boston style area. I get it. They're probably, if they have any crossover to football, they're used to sitting through some of that, and there was definitely more fans that showed up than I expected. But yeah, just giving people a better product. I think with Supercross is first and foremost. So long-winded answer around is about the policing everything. I think the ultimate answer is we need to be more flexible about these race times. And I know some people want to talk about more indoor stadiums. When you actually do the math, there's not that many indoor stadiums in the country that can support a Supercross race. I get the limitations there. I think we just have to do our best to manipulate the schedule, even if that requires, hey, Friday was great. Let's knock out a practice or 2 on Friday. Let's do a time qualifying first thing in the morning. Let's move up the race 4 hours. Adam, that's how I personally feel.
I disagree with most of that because it did rain very hard on Thursday. So although, yes, black and white looking at it, us pushing the schedule to start basically when it rained didn't look great. But I do think if we'd started at 7 a.m. when it was not raining, the track would have still been destroyed. It still would have been heavy, muddy. It wouldn't have been much different, I don't think, to the main event. So I don't think that there was really a way to pivot around that.
See, I understand your point. Like, yes, if the race, I don't disagree. If practice was just earlier and the races were at a different time. And again, I'm not saying this is a perfect answer. I don't know if it would have quite worked in this situation, but moving everything back as much as you could, because even just teams here, like, okay, if you would have moved the schedule up like 4 hours, basically, could you have gone through practices and heats at least before we had that downpour, and the only thing we had was a main that looked more like the heat races? Like, is that still better than what we ended up with, which was just a complete shit show?
I think it arguably could have been worse, because we've said on this podcast that rain helps. So running on a wet track in dry conditions from 7 a.m. to noon, I don't think it would have looked much different. I really don't.
So the reason I say that, though, is I went down, walked the track. It wasn't that, don't get me wrong, it was sloppy in places. It wasn't that. I personally did not feel like it was that bad.
No, but
when they entered. But
it's easy to say that because look at the SMX Next practice. They were flying. They were doing the jumps. It was amazing. I feel like it's gonna look like that before we're deep into the program.
But we had that 30 minutes of downpour right before. That's what I'm saying. Like, push it up enough, because that's what I heard most of the teams were pissed about. Is the track was tarped. They pulled the tarps, and 20 minutes later, the rain we knew that was going to come in dumped hard for 30 minutes before SMX Next went out. We knew that was incoming.
I think the worst possible scenario for the organisers and the track crew and everyone is what we had, which is, as you say, rain scheduled to start with the program, because I think at that point, there's nothing you can do to maneuver around it. That is almost like the trump card that Mother Nature has to screw the organisers. Anything else, as we've seen, as long as it doesn't rain in the night show, they can figure it out, and etc., etc., etc. I just don't know how you maneuver around that.
To my original point, aggressive schedule change. But again, we knew by Friday morning what it looked like. They'd already canceled press day. Take the opposite approach of telling teams, having this conversation with teams of hey, prepare to be flexible. We may run some practice on Friday afternoon. Maybe we just go straight to some sort of a free practice the morning. You do your time qualifying on Friday. You guys get a look at the tracks there. We just go racing. Let's get it done early before this turns into a shit show. I guess what I'm saying, where I'm coming around to this is not really the argument of could it be done, should it not be done, is if we were to be that aggressive, is it worth it for the end product? Is actually, I guess, more my standpoint is, as a sport, should we look to be as aggressive as F1 and NASCAR and MotoGP with our scheduling to perform with a better product? Not really this exact situation of how it would have played out at Foxborough, but as a sport, should we think that way?
Well, and I think we are. I think we've seen a step in that direction with Birmingham last year, when actually we ended up with a relatively dry race, but the track was already weatherproofed. We've never seen an action like that taken so far in advance. So I think we are moving in that direction somewhat. To move everything or half of the program to Friday, I would imagine there's difficulty with that, with stadium staff and all of those sort of logistics of who's on hand on the Friday. Obviously, for those other series, they're running their schedule on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so all of those days look identical from a logistics point of view, whereas for us, we're very much one shot only, so the show is only there for one day, which penalizes us somewhat.
I don't know, because I go back to, so they changed futures this year. Last year, we ran futures practices on a Friday after press day.
But I'm talking about stadium security, fans coming in, health and safety, whoever else is there.
Screw that. I'm saying yes, if the racing program, you need that. I'm saying time qualifying, you move some of it into Friday if you absolutely have to, and you say screw it. Give the fans the best racing product the next day. But that's my counter is. I understand your point. Like, I basically at that point am saying, like, hey, yeah, you move some of the time qualifying into Friday, and yeah, you lose out on it with the the fan standpoint. Which, no matter what, like, how many fans are going to take to an adjustment on a Friday? Where Saturday, yeah, you're still going to lose out some people, but are you going to gain on the end of they get a better product because it's not a pouring rain hellhole when they're there?
I just think it's splitting hairs where, again, with the circumstance of timings and weather and all of that and the way it laid out, I don't know how you pivot around that. I just don't see a scenario where that can improve because the track, I've seen videos from the track crew on Thursday, it was a goner. There was no chance. And like even when I spoke to the track crew early Friday morning, they were like, yep, there's already nothing we can do. We're already past the point of gone. Like they even said, like, we won't be touching some sections from now because if we touch it, we make it worse. So I think we were gone much sooner than what your theory would counter. And I just think we were gone.
That's what I'm getting back to is like I said, some of my point here wasn't as much like Foxborough is as a whole, should we be open to being that flexible? Like, if the circumstances were different, like, okay, track wasn't that bad. We didn't get that much rain beforehand, but we know Saturday is going to be terrible from 4 p.m. on. We know it's going to be terrible. Do we adjust? Do we move earlier? If, again, I'm not talking exactly about how everything played out at Foxborough. I'm talking about the whole grand scheme of things as these come to us in the future.
I think they would be open to that. I think, but also using Birmingham last year as a reference point, I think it's difficult because, again, they prepped that to be the muddiest race in history, and it actually ended up being fine. So they overcorrected somewhat. So I feel for them in that sense because that kind of like was them going, we're being more flexible and open than ever. And then it ended up being like, well, that kind of made the product worse.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, that maybe almost hurt that line of thinking a little bit because that was almost step one of an experiment and it failed. Which then where do you go with that experiment next? We are just pot luck a little bit. And yes, going back to how I started this conversation, it doesn't look spectacular on TV. For us, I said this about Seattle as well, for us who can appreciate Chase and Cooper doubling through that section at slow speed, we get it. But that product, no matter how you spin it, that's not entertaining to people who don't understand the technicality involved. So I think that is just generally a downfall of the landscape of our sport is that the wet is going to hurt us more than any other race series, and we can try to correct that, but I don't quite know how we do that. I mean, look at the MXGP of Castilla-La Mancha, the second round this year. It was similar, just a complete mess, and they knew it was going to be all week, and they were throwing around all of these ideas, and just in the end, it's like, what can you do? We can't cancel events indoors or out because of a forecast, because then what? At that point, are we even a professional sport? And once you set the precedent for that, that's a dangerous place to be, because then it becomes easier to the teams to go, it looks a bit bad, cancel it.
Isn't it funny that we're looking back, and I mean, the circumstances were extreme. I'm still actually shocked that we lost Oakland the 1 year. And that had more to do with the buildup, like just not being able to process the track because of the flooding same. It is still kind of shocking for me. Yes, because I agree with that. I'm never on the boat of canceling, and I'm still somewhat shocked that we lost Oakland the 1 year and had to redo it.
Yeah, I think that really just points to that must have been worse than any of us can even picture in our heads.
I'm pretty sure you saw it. You saw the track, the pictures of the track that was never raced. It was just a couple double. Their issue was definitely the build. And I mean, you have to imagine if they were in a situation of no other gaps in the series, I wonder if we would have gone and tried. Like if we hadn't been in the situation where, okay, we have an off weekend, it was like, 3 or 4 weeks later, and we were able to double back. If we didn't have that, if we would have gone through with it.
Yeah, I would imagine that there was a scenario where we were going to go through with it. I mean, maybe Philadelphia this weekend is going to be similar in the sense of I think it's already quite wet there, so I think the build may be a struggle. I would bet that a Birmingham-style track last year is in the process in Philadelphia because that already seems to be a goner. Whereas, again, with Foxborough, the forecast was dry for Friday all week, and it always said Saturday afternoon. And as we've seen time and time again, there's a chance that rain just doesn't come until midnight. You know, like you are flirting with the edges. I can't remember exactly, but there was a Supercross last year where it was meant to rain crazy during the night show. The forecast said that all week, and then it never quite came. And the second we started doing post-race interviews, it was the most horrific rain in the history of the world. And had that dropped when it was forecast, Noah's Ark wouldn't have been able to save us. So just like luck, I guess. Whereas F1, MotoGP, you can pull them into pit lane, and you can sit there and say, hey, we're on a rain delay. But like, we just don't have that luxury. Well, again, I think I've used this phrasing for a lot of scenarios, but we are just a very raw motorsport at its core.
Yeah.
We just don't have, to the chagrin of the organisers, we just don't have that many luxuries to pivot to. We kind of just have to close our eyes and go for it. And to the point, to disagree with one more point, yes, of course, I feel for the riders, the teams and everything, but you're choosing to enter a professional arena. Oh, yeah. This comes with it. If you're a privateer crying, poor me, then don't go out there. We saw that, again, to reference the MXGP of Castilla-La Mancha round 2 of this year. Valentin Guillo, a full privateer, he was at the track and just didn't race on Sunday because he said, I'm not willing to trash my equipment and replace everything.
I will say, not about our sport being raw. I could tell not many guys consider this. Time qualifying, guys like Chase that was sitting number 1 and nobody was touching his time for and he was in the pits. I actually heard it was like telling him, like, you don't need to go back out. And he waited a lap or 2 and still went back out. Phoenix guys did the same thing. Dylan was like 5th or 6th on the board and they're like, you're fine. And he kind of sat there for a while and he still went back out. I kind of cracked up that more of the guys in time qualifying, once you were, the track was going to go away and get worse and worse no matter what. Like, and the amount of wear and tear it was on things and just knowing like, you only have so many certain items and just what it does to bikes. I was a little more surprised that more of our guys in our sport didn't just go out and go, okay, I'm 8th or 7th on the board. It doesn't really get much better than this, and just went down the tunnel and called it for the session. Well, almost everybody just stuck it out. And I was very, very surprised by that.
I would imagine that's a little bit of an OCD personality thing, because if I put myself in those shoes, I would imagine that if I'm Chase sat there, I know my time's good, but in my head I'm like, I can't feel good about myself going into the night show having done 1 lap. Like I just need to get some reps in here just to give myself validation and to calm myself heading into the night show. Like I'd imagine it's an element of that as well. That's certainly how I would be in that situation, but I guess it depends on each person. I mean, you see that as well in their mud prep. Some people, there's a lot of intricacies in what they do and the steps they take, and others just treat it like a dry race, line up and go for it. Again, very raw motorsport. But interesting, and who knows what lies ahead for round 13. Unlucky for some in Philadelphia this weekend. What does lie ahead is rain. We know that. But to what degree? And could we be sat here next week saying Cooper Webb is going to be the champion? Or could we be sat here next week going, oh my God, what a turnaround. This thing is just back underway. That's the exciting thing about the rain. It really can bring anything. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Decal Works, major part of all of our post-race content at Vital MX, Yamaha Motor USA, Yoshimura, MotorX, and Fox Racing for all of their support of the Vital MX post-race show. Thank you to everyone for listening and watching. Of course, we are on YouTube now, if that's how you want to consume your content. Just bear it in mind if you're a faithful, loyal audio listener. Maybe that's an option for you. We will be back in 7 days' time to discuss Philadelphia, as I said. But from now, I've been your host, Lewis Phillips, and we will see you next week.